Jacques-René Chirac is a French politician, who served as the President of France from 1995 to 2007. He served as Prime Minister of France from 1974 to 1976 and from 1986 to 1988, and as Mayor of Paris from 1977 to 1995. After completing his degree at the Institut d'études politiques de Paris, a term at Harvard University and the École Nationale d'Administration, Chirac began his career as a high-level civil servant, and soon entered politics. He occupied various senior positions, including Minister of Agriculture, Minister of the Interior, Prime Minister, Mayor of Paris, and finally President of the French Republic. Chirac's internal policies included lower tax rates, the removal of price controls, strong punishment for crime and terrorism, and business privatization. He also argued for more socially responsible economic policies, and was elected in 1995 after campaigning on a platform of healing the social rift. After less statist policy when he was prime minister, he changed his method. Then, his economic policies, based on dirigisme, state-directed ideals, stood in opposition to the laissez-faire policies of the United Kingdom, which Chirac famously described as Anglo-Saxon ultraliberalism. On 15 December 2011, the Paris court declared him guilty of diverting public funds and abusing public confidence, and gave Chirac a 2-year suspended prison sentence. Family, early life, education and early career. Chirac, born in the Defroy Saint-Hilaire clinic, is the son of Abel François-Marie Chirac, a successful executive for an aircraft company, and Marie-Louise Vallet, a housewife. His great-grandparents on both sides were peasants, but his two grandfathers were teachers from Saint-Ferréol in Corrèze. According to Chirac, his name originates from the langue d'oc, that of the troubadours, therefore that of poetry. He is a Roman Catholic. Chirac was an only child. He was educated in Paris at the Cours Hattemer, a private school. He then attended the Lycée Carnot at the Lycée Louis le Grand. After his baccalaureate, he served for 3 months as a sailor on a coal transporter. Chirac played rugby union for Brive's youth team, and also played at university level. He played No. 8 and second row. In 1956, he married Bernadette Chaudron de Courcelles, with whom he had 2 daughters, Laurence and Claude. Claude has long worked as a public relations assistant and personal advisor, while Laurence, who suffered from anorexia nervosa in her youth, does not participate in the political activities of her father. Chirac is the grandfather of Martin Ray Chirac by the relationship of Claude with French judoka Thierry Ray. Jacques and Bernadette Chirac also have a foster daughter, Anh d'Outraxel. Inspired by General Charles de Gaulle, Chirac started to pursue a civil service career in the 1950s. During this period, he joined the French Communist Party, sold copies of Humanité, and took part in meetings of a communist cell. In 1950, he signed the Soviet-inspired Stockholm Appeal for the abolition of nuclear weapons, which led him to be questioned when he applied for his first visa to the United States. In 1953, after graduating from the Paris Institute of Political Studies, he attended Harvard University's summer school, before entering the ENA, the Grande École Nationale School of Administration, which trains France's top civil servants. In 1957, Chirac trained as a reserve military officer in armored cavalry at Saumur, where he was ranked first in his year. He then volunteered to fight in the Algerian War, using personal connections to be sent despite the reservations of his superiors. His superiors did not want to make him an officer because they suspected he had communist leanings. After leaving the ENA in 1959, he became a civil servant in the Court of Auditors. Early political career, 1962 to 1974. In April 1962, Chirac was appointed head of the personal staff of Prime Minister Georges Pompidou. This appointment launched Chirac's political career. Pompidou considered Chirac his protégé, and referred to him as «my bulldozer» for his skill at getting things done. The nickname «Le Bulldozer» caught on in French political circles. Chirac still maintained this reputation. In 1995, an anonymous British diplomat said Chirac cuts through the crap and comes straight to the point. It's refreshing, although you have to put your seatbelt on when you work with him. At Pompidou's suggestion, Chirac ran as a Gaullist for a seat in the National Assembly in 1967. He was elected deputy for his home Corrèze department, a stronghold of the left. This surprising victory in the context of a Gaullist ebb permitted him to enter the government as Minister of Social Affairs. Although Chirac was well situated in de Gaulle's entourage, when student and worker unrest rocked France in May 1968, Chirac played a central role in negotiating a truce. Then, as State Secretary of Economy, he worked closely with Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, who headed the Ministry of Economy and Finance. Cabinet Minister after some months in the Ministry of Relations with Parliament. Chirac's first high-level post came in 1972 when he became Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development under Pompidou, who had been elected president in 1969, after de Gaulle retired. Chirac quickly earned a reputation as a champion of French farmers' interests, and first attracted international attention when he assailed U.S., West German, and European Commission agricultural policies which conflicted with French interests. On 27 February 1974, after the resignation of Raymond Marcellin, Chirac was appointed Minister of the Interior. On 21 March 1974, he cancelled the Safari project due to privacy concerns after its existence was revealed by Le Monde. From March 1974, he was entrusted by President Pompidou with preparations for the presidential election then scheduled for 1976. These elections were moved forward because of Pompidou's sudden death on 2 April 1974. Chirac vainly attempted to rally Gaullists behind Prime Minister Pierre Mesmer. Jacques Chirac announced his candidacy in spite of the disapproval of the Pompidouians. Chirac and others published the call of the 43 in favor of Giscard d'Estaing, the leader of the non-Gaullist part of the parliamentary majority. Giscard d'Estaing was elected as Pompidou's successor after France's most competitive election campaign in years. In return, the new president chose Chirac to lead the cabinet. Prime Minister. When Valéry Giscard d'Estaing became president, he nominated Chirac as Prime Minister on 27 May 1974. In order to reconcile the Giscardian and non-Giscardian factions of the parliamentary majority, at the age of 41, Chirac stood out as the very model of the Jean Loups of French politics. But he was faced with the hostility of the barons of Gaullism, who considered him a traitor for his role during the previous presidential campaign. In December 1974, he took the lead of the Union of Democrats for the Republic against the will of its Mossad personalities. As Prime Minister, Chirac quickly set about persuading the Gaullists that, despite the social reforms proposed by President Giscard, the basic tenets of Gaullism, such as national and European independence, would be retained. Chirac was advised by Pierre Juillet and Marie-France Gouraud, two former advisors of Pompidou. These two organized the campaign against Chaban-Delmas in 1974. They advocated a clash with Giscard d'Estaing because they thought his policy bewildered the conservative electorate. Citing Giscard's unwillingness to give him authority, Chirac resigned as Prime Minister in 1976. He proceeded to build up his political base among France's several conservative parties, with the goal of reconstituting the Gaullist UDR into a neo-Gaullist group, the Rally for the Republic. Chirac's first tenure as prime minister was also an arguably progressive one, with improvements in both the minimum wage and the social welfare system carried out during the course of his premiership. Chirac controversy. At the invitation of Saddam Hussein, Chirac made an official visit to Baghdad in 1975. Saddam approved a deal granting French oil companies a number of privileges plus a 23% share of Iraqi oil. As part of this deal, France sold Iraq the Osirak MTR nuclear reactor, a type designed to test nuclear materials. The Israeli Air Force alleged that the reactor's imminent commissioning was a threat to its security, and preemptively bombed the Osirak reactor on 7 June 1981. Provoking considerable anger from French officials and the United Nations Security Council. The Osirak deal became a controversy again in 2002-2003, when an international military coalition led by the United States invaded Iraq and forcibly removed Hussein's government from power. France led several other European countries in an effort to prevent the invasion. The Osirak deal was then used by parts of the American media to criticize the Chirac-led opposition to starting a war in Iraq. Despite French involvement in the Gulf War, Mayor of Paris. After his departure from the cabinet, Chirac wanted to gain the leadership of the political right. In order to gain the French presidency in the future, the RPR was conceived as an electoral machine against President Giscard d'Estaing. Paradoxically, Chirac benefited from Giscard's decision to create the office of mayor in Paris, which had been in abeyance since the 1871 Commune, because the leaders of the Third Republic feared that having municipal control of the capital would give the mayor too much power. In 1977, Chirac stood as a candidate against Michel Dornano, a close friend of the president, and he won. As mayor of Paris, Chirac's political influence grew. He held this post until 1995. Chirac supporters point out that, as mayor, he provided programs to help the elderly, people with disabilities, and single mothers, and introduced the street-cleaning motorquota, while providing incentives for businesses to stay in Paris. His opponents contend that he installed clientelist policies. Conviction for corruption. Chirac has been named in several cases of alleged corruption that occurred during his term as mayor, some of which have led to felony convictions of some politicians and aides. However, a controversial judicial decision in 1999 granted Chirac immunity while he was president of France. He refused to testify on these matters, arguing that it would be incompatible with his presidential functions. Investigations concerning the running of Paris's City Hall, the number of whose municipal employees jumped by 25% from 1977 to 1995, as well as a lack of financial transparency and the communal debt, were thwarted by the legal impossibility of questioning him as president. The conditions of the privatization of the Parisian water network, acquired very cheaply by the Générale and the Lyonnaise des Eaux, then directed by Jérôme Monod, a close friend of Chirac, were also criticized. Furthermore, the satirical newspaper Le Canard enchaîné Acute revealed the astronomical food expenses paid by the Parisian municipality, expenses managed by Roger Romani. Thousands of people were invited each year to receptions in the Paris City Hall, while many political, media and artistic personalities were hosted in private flats owned by the city. Chirac's immunity from prosecution ended in May 2007, when he left office as president. In November 2007, a preliminary charge of misuse of public funds was filed against him. Chirac is said to be the first former French head of state to be formally placed under investigation for a crime. On 30 October 2009, a judge ordered Chirac to stand trial on embezzlement charges, dating back to his time as mayor of Paris. On 15 December 2011, Chirac was found guilty in two related cases, involving 19 totally or partially fake jobs paid by the city of Paris. which he led as Paris mayor from 1977 to 1995 but created for the benefit of the RPR party. He was convicted of embezzling public funds, abuse of trust, and illegal conflict of interest. Struggle for the right-wing leadership, 1978 to 1981. In 1978, he attacked the pro-European policy of Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, and made a nationalist turn with the December 1978 call of Cauchy, initiated by his councillors Marie-France Gouraud and Pierre Juillet, which had first been called by Pompidou. Hospitalized in Cauchy Hospital after a crash, he declared that, as always about the drooping of France, the pro-foreign party acts with its peaceable and reassuring voice. He appointed Ivan Blot, an intellectual who would later join the National Front, as director of his campaigns for the 1979 European election. After the poor results of the election, Chirac broke with Gouraud and Juillet. Vexed Marie-France Gouraud stated, "We thought Chirac was made of the same marble of which statues are carved in. We perceive he's of the same faience bidets are made of." His rivalry with Giscard d'Estaing intensified, although it has been often interpreted by historians as the struggle between two rival French right-wing families. Both figures in fact were members of the liberal, Orleanist tradition, according to historian Alain Gerard-Slammer. But the eviction of the Gaullist barons and of President VGE convinced Chirac to assume a strong neo-Gaullist stance. Chirac made his first run for president against Giscard d'Estaing in the 1981 election, thus splitting the centre-right vote. He was eliminated in the first round with 18% of the vote. He reluctantly supported Giscard in the second round. He refused to give instructions to the RPR voters but said that he supported the incumbent president, in a private capacity, which was almost like a de facto support of the Socialist Party's candidate, François Mitterrand, who was elected by a broad majority. Giscard has always blamed Chirac for his defeat. He was told by Mitterrand, before his death, that the latter had dined with Chirac before the election. Chirac told the socialist candidate that he wanted to get rid of Giscard. In his memoirs, Giscard wrote that between the two rounds, he phoned the RPR headquarters. He passed himself off as a right-wing voter by changing his voice. The RPR employee advised him, "Certainly do not vote Giscard." After 1981, the relationship between the two men became tense, with Giscard, even though he was in the same government coalition as Chirac, criticizing Chirac's actions openly. After the May 1981 presidential election, the right also lost the subsequent legislative election that year. However, as Giscard had been knocked out, Chirac appeared as the principal leader of the right-wing opposition. Due to his attacks against the economic policy of the socialist government, he gradually aligned himself with prevailing economic liberal opinion, even though it did not correspond with Gaullist doctrine. While the far-right National Front grew, taking advantage of a proportional representation electoral law, he signed an electoral platform with the Giscardian party Union for French Democracy.